everybody to DevOps Drinks. It's our weekly show about digital innovation. I'm Gina Smith.
I'm Michael Araneta.
And we're going to have Peter Dorrington on later. Now, he's a consultant that focuses on predictive analytics. So what he tells financial services people what their user interfaces should be like based on what he thinks they'll do.
They also do quite a lot of work in terms of predicting customer behavior and the impact of customer behavior to customer requirements. They work with banks and traditional financial services companies, but they also work with other industries as well. So a very interesting conversation that we'll have eventually.
It's all about customer experience, right?
That's right. And I'm also quite interested to find out what drinks he would recommend for this heightened state of emotions that everyone is in.
And he'll be in London, so maybe he'll be drinking tea.
That might be the case.
Maybe not. That's such a standard thing for somebody to say. Anyway, first thing is, wow, there sure is a lot of CI/CD stuff in the news this week. Let's see, GitLab updated its CI/CD platform. They're adding cybersecurity, value stream management. Circle CI announced a new analytics tool called Build Track, which it's integrating with its platform and with Git to improve commit and build performance, data visibility. CI/CD is huge now.
CI/CD is huge, and I think we were expecting this as well. But I think of all these two announcements, we notice a trend about how CI/CD is becoming easier to use, right? For example, when you talk about introduction of AI capabilities to look at a description, for example, of what has been committed in a way that is easy to understand by the users, that actually speaks of the ability of CI/CD now to be easily communicated, articulated, so that you have a sense of what has been committed very intuitively.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense because if you look at, during the pandemic, it's all about, getting lots of software and constantly integrating and constantly deploying. And so CI/CD is more important than ever. So
that's correct. And if you are going to measure your performance and your ability to, survive this current situation that we are in, it's actually about deployment. All right, and you can talk about all the commitments that you have of code that needs to go to the market, but if nothing is deployed, then you cannot see value from your work. And this value only manifests itself once this is deployed fully, either through the applications that you are using across the enterprise, but also through some of the mobile applications that you have already in the market.
This is something the average person doesn't understand out there. Like, why does Netflix never go down, or Facebook, or, any of these services? Because they're constantly integrating in fixes and changes and constantly deploying, zillions of times a day. And, we're seeing that IT people, are now predicting that they will be deploying at least once a day in coming months and years, maybe even faster.
Yeah, and I think that's the entire point of all of these, right? To make things as fast as possible so that you can respond to market changes very quickly.
Yeah. And before we get to Peter Dorrington, I just wanted to do a shout out. Our Asia Pacific 2020 software survey is out. And this was done in January, so before the COVID stuff really got going. And even then, we were looking at 17.5% of the 969 IT pros that we surveyed through Asia saying that CI/CD was going to be a big priority for them over the next 18 months.
And it does seem to indicate that the importance of CI/CD is associated with the search for new business revenues. That was this survey done in January, but I think speaks of the ability of the organization to really look at associating their dev work to being able to build more business. And I don't think that things have changed, even in the context of the crisis. We need to be searching for new revenues, whether it's new products or new services, out to the market very fast.
That's a really excellent point, because people hear DevOps and they think, well, it's all about development, or it's all about merging development and operation, but really it's about furthering business goals. Let's guard against digital disruption, let's get new audiences. We shouldn't give away the whole farm with a survey, but we can bring up a couple of slides that just with some highlights of the survey. All right, so the focus of the survey was to ask the 900 plus IT people we surveyed throughout Asia what their priorities were digital innovation wise for IT, for business, for development. And you just mentioned one of the business priorities. And we showed 22.3% of companies of these IT pros said that creating new revenue streams was what is driving their development activities. And that's almost a quarter.
Yes.
But when we asked them this last year, they all said speed of deployment. So this is really changed.
Right. Yeah, and this also talks about a focus on increasing customer loyalty. Obviously, they want to look at apps that make their service more sticky to the customers. So this is still an aggressive approach, really, to use CI/CD or other techniques to make you build more business.
Yeah, that customer loyalty thing is huge. When Mark Andreessen, the co-founder of Netscape, said, software is eating the world, and he said this back in, I guess, 2011. The future of all enterprises is to be like software companies. This is what he meant. Like, how loyal would you be to your old bank, for instance, if a startup came up and offered you a more evocative or compelling experience? People weren't loyal to bookstores or cabs or any of that. And I guess that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about digital disruption.
And we talked to Peter Dorrington later to really understand what is the impact of customer behavior, customer mood and sentiment, especially in this time of the coronavirus, to customer loyalty as well. Yeah,
and you know what? Now would be a good time to bring on Peter Dorrington. So he's with a company called XMplify, which is a consultancy, and he goes out and he helps companies. Well, I guess he combines data science and behavioral psychological science to help enterprises figure out what's coming next. Did I encapsulate that okay?
I think that's how he would describe himself.
All right, well, Peter Dorrington joins us from London. So with COVID-19, boy, you must be having a field day, because not just how will this affect, enterprise and companies and innovation, but buying habits, balancing the rational and the emotional. Huh? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes. Oh gosh, what a lot can change in just a few months. So let's put a little bit of context first. Until quite recently, a lot of our understanding of consumer behavior was based upon a relatively steady state. Prices were fairly stable. There was a superabundance of goods and services. That's lots of competition for the same kind of customers. And that was pretty predictable. So we've developed years and years of data and insights and developed experience based upon those on that steady state. Well, we're not in a steady state now. I did an emotional forecast for the UK a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at the development of strong emotions. Now, in a population of 60 odd million, that's obviously going to be somewhat generalized, but there are some definite things that are going on right now that we can see how they're going to develop in the future. So right now, we're just coming out of the surprise phase. This caught all of us a little bit unawares. We weren't prepared, which was followed by anxiety. What's going on? What will it mean next? And then some fear. Am I going to get sick? Is somebody I know going to get sick? Am I going to lose my job? And of course, the depression that follows that. So right now, where we are in terms of looking at consumer behavior is two quite different dynamics. The first of which is emotionally, we're anxious and we don't know what the future would hold. And both of those are very strong emotions. The second is we've become hyper-rational, and we've actually focused on the basic needs, the essentials.
Find the toilet paper.
Yeah, at one point I thought we were one toilet roll from anarchy. in the country. It's just getting that bad.
Just, laser focused on basic needs.
Yeah, and but what that actually means is that for many businesses, we're going to enter a period of not only macroeconomic uncertainty or depression, but extreme conservatism in terms of what consumers are doing. So they're going to put off making those big discretionary investments or spends. They're going to want to look after their savings. They're going to focus on feeling more secure, less worried about what the future, and better prepared, because we don't know whether there's going to be a wave 2, 3, or 4, whether this will go on for a few months or possibly even years.
Right.
Now,
you give advice to companies, obviously, as you look at introducing the concept of emotions to how they design the customer experience. What is the principle of a company looking at this emotional state of the customer that's highly anxious, but also uncertain about the future, and then hyper-rational as well? Are there certain principles that a company needs to just really focus on so that they do the right things?
Yeah, and I think that by and large, we're going to continue to have to deliver a good customer experience, irrespective of the channels that we use. That's just taken for granted now.
Maybe better than ever, right? Because if people are conservative in their buying, you got to really grab them.
Yeah. So what was happening before COVID-19 and will be much more deeply felt after that was a need for, particularly in sectors like retail banking or retail financial services, to be seen to be different from the competition, because it's basically commoditized. We look at the big retail banks, we think they're all the same. A checking account is a checking account, a deposit account is a deposit account. And although we might be interested in rates, it's very hard to tell them apart. So we were already trying to engage customers at an emotional level. Now, for many businesses, they call that emotive business or empathic business. And there are 3 kinds of empathy that we can feel as humans and that we can try to replicate. The first of which is the emotional empathy. I can feel what you're feeling and I can understand it. The one that businesses tend to focus on is cognitive empathy. I don't feel what you're feeling, but I know what you're feeling and I can understand why you're
I can
feeling
imagine how you feel.
Yes. Yeah. So it's and most businesses do that because they're not actually a consumer themselves. They're servicing consumers. The highest level is compassionate empathy, which is where I take what I know and I can understand about what you're feeling, and I move to do something about that. And that's going to become super important for businesses in the coming months and years, because we're going to be dealing with more customers who are distressed, more customers who are really struggling with how to make decisions. They're going to be doing lots of value judgments. And what we do know about people is that emotion plays a huge role in their decision making, much more so than most people expect. We all like to think we're smart, rational, logical kind of people. The reality is most of us make a decision emotionally and rationalize it afterwards. But when it comes to money, it's particularly bad. We didn't evolve with money. It's a relatively new concept. So we make really bad decisions about money. So
based on our childhood, our personal experiences, our problems with authority, probably.
Yeah, lots. But simply because for most of us, it's an abstraction. Unless you actually have piles of notes or coins in front of you, it all becomes a bit meaningless above a certain level. But because we don't know how to think and act about money, we're very dependent upon good advice, but also what other people are doing. And this is why so many people who develop experiences build in feedback. They want to get star ratings. They want to get high satisfaction scores because we can point at that. And for those people who don't know how to make a decision, and I'll put myself in that group, often we're quite lazy and we want to go with the herd. We want to go with the 5-star rated product. We don't typically break out a spreadsheet and start to do a really considered approach. So for businesses, trying to understand what drives behavior, and that's after all what's driving the business outcome, there's a combination of having to think about what component of a decision is emotional. So what I want to feel happier, I want to feel less afraid. What I need, which is more rational, which might be price or convenience, how other people are influencing the decisions, and are predictably irrational logic. But the most important things are what's happening right now and what has been your own personal journey to now. Because our experience informs a lot about how we decide what to do next.
So if you have all these customers who are scared to death, or as you said, they're worried about losing their jobs, their money, they're more conservative, it would serve a financial services firm, I guess, to come off as, hey, we're here to help you. We're going to give you a break.
And it's clearly that there's a limit to what a business can do. If somebody's in deep financial distress.
That was my question. How far can they go with this and still seem authentic?
Yeah, you can't bail somebody out of that kind of circumstance. But what you can do is think about, can we offer you a better product in the future? Can we help explain it in a way that would resonate more closely with what you feel, so that it makes the decision a little easier to take? But most importantly, adjust your tone of voice. If you're feeling beleaguered, that things aren't going great, you're worried and you're concerned, the last thing you want is happy clappy on the end of the phone. You want
no happy clappy.
No. Yeah, so take me seriously. Show that you care, and be authentic about it, by the way. One of the things that's frustrating me at the moment are so many letters from the CEO that the CEO's never even seen. It's the marketing department are sending them out right now, and they're inauthentic. So if you're going to work with people emotionally, get some authenticity into it. You really do need to understand what they're going.
It's obviously a challenge for your left brain type of banker, right? Who just really focuses on numbers. And we've always assumed that the successful bankers of the world are really, really good with numbers or compartmentalizing like certain quantities. Especially as you look at risk management, liquidity, and so on. This is obviously a huge jump for the traditional banker to think about the other side of the brain, to be more empathic, to really think about the customer. This is how does technology play a role in being able to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so being able to address the emotional needs of people. When I talk about developing use cases with developers, I say there's a functional use case which drives the user experience, and you can instrument for that. What is it that the user is trying to do and how, and their particular use case. But you should be writing emotional use cases. You should be thinking about how do we want users to feel in the future. Now, for the people who, as you say, are very left brain, very logical, very deep, there's a couple of cautionary tales for them. The first of which is when people are faced with a big, confusing decision, giving them more facts and data doesn't help. It actually just makes it more difficult for them to make a decision. You cannot reason somebody out of an emotional state of mind. You have to be able to understand what's driving that. The second of which point is that, let's say, emotions play a much bigger role than we think that they do. Even in big financial decisions, like who do I go to make investments or obtain a mortgage, we put a lot of trust into organizations, and trust is not necessarily a wholly logical decision. It's one of the things that's going to be challenging right now with video conferences like these is how do you develop that sense of trust with people that you can't actually read body language from, that you're not in the same room. But if you want to survive the future, and what banks will, we provide valuable services to our customers. The challenge will be, as we come out the other side of COVID-19, there will be a dash to grab market share in the road to recovery. And those organizations that can reach people at both the logical and the emotional level will achieve success far better than those that focus on slash rates or make lots of very discrete offers. It's sadly true, most people do not like complexity. We like simple answers to things. And if we can make the lives of our customers simpler, easier, help them make the best decisions, that will pay the dividend in the long haul. Because
it's like after 2008, after the downturn.
Yeah, we saw it after the GFC. We saw that those organizations that even in the fog of war were thinking about how do we make a quick start on recovery afterwards were the ones that did grab market share, were the ones that pulled ahead.
And there was a time of great innovation, wasn't there, after the 2008 downturn? I mean, I read something recently about how Shakespeare wrote Macbeth during when all the theaters closed in London during one of the rounds of the plague. And 50 years later, 60 years later, Newton developed calculus when he was hiding out in social distancing in his summer home. I mean, shouldn't this be a great time for innovation for these enterprises to really think of just brand new, out of the box ways to reach out?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm anticipating there'll be at least a decade of innovation after this. Now, we've had a kickstart. Lots of organizations have had to embark on the dash to digital as physical infrastructure simply become unavailable through social distancing, some of which is good and some of which is not quite so good. But if I was designing experiences right now, there's a simple process that I follow. The first of which is uncover what the question is, the mystery. What is it that we don't know? And human behavior for a long time was a mystery. Why do apparently similar people behave differently? From that, we can develop our theory, or the heuristic, an understanding of behavior such as it's a combination of emotion and logic. And from those, we can start to develop models. And the models are what we can scale up into operation. So if we understand what is driving the behavior and we can model it in a replicable way, then we can scale it. And for some of the banks that I've been talking to, this is an issue that they want to get beyond understanding customers at the conversational level, and they're using great tools like natural language processing and voice stress or video analysis to do the conversational analysis. But they want to be able to scale it to millions of customers, including the ones they're not currently talking to. So what's going on right now is a real push in how do we extrapolate what we're learning about groups of people to approach a general population. So how do I take what I've learned about a few thousand people and apply it to millions?
And how do they do it and still sound authentic and not like some kind of a bot?
Yes, I have seen people try to do this and not do it quite right. There's this thing about authenticity and dissonance. As human beings, we're actually quite good at picking up on people who aren't genuinely feeling what they say they're feeling, or they say something that actually they don't feel. That's the dissonance part of that. Now, lots of businesses have done very well offering a very acceptable, cheap experience. And that's a wholly rational approach. Hey, it's not great, but it's cheap. But if you want to preserve margins, if you want to maintain rather the level of business you've got and build on it, then you do have to offer more than just an acceptable experience. So again, for designers, when I'm instrumenting experiences, say, clearly the user experience is important. Does it functionally work? Absolutely. But how could we instrument this so that we could get an insight into what people are feeling at that time? And the worst way to do that, if you want to know how somebody is feeling, the worst thing to do is ask them.
Yeah, don't ask them.
Right.
Yeah. Because none of us know, right?
Well, unless it's a Swede. A Swede will generally tell you exactly. You can never just say, hey, how's it going to a Swede, because they will tell you. And you're like, no, I was just being polite. I didn't really want to know about your, separations.
But this obviously takes time, right? I mean, you're looking at millions as a customer base of a typical organization, like a bank, for example. Yeah. How do you know that whatever you've done to understand what drives human behavior is enough so that you can move on to designing a good customer experience?
Good question.
Okay, so there's two parts to this. The first of which is to figure out what people really care about, which is not necessarily what they say they care about. And there are good techniques for inferring that. So we can do some inductive reasoning around, if we do this, people don't like it. So for example, if I send somebody a penalty notice for going overdrawn, I don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out they probably don't like it. Then there's the operational part of that. And what the operational part has to acknowledge is that everybody's individual journey is slightly different. So whether somebody will respond positively or negatively, or how negatively to that notice, depends upon how they already feel. If they don't like you as a bank and you send them a penalty notice, that might be the final straw that gets them to cancel their account. But if they love you, they'll probably forgive you. But how they got there is a stream of events. Now, this is where banks have a unique value that cannot be reverse engineered. If you build features into an app, they can be copied. If you build functionality into a service, that can be copied. But your relationship with your customer typically can't. It's unique to you. And the banks know what they've done in the relationship they have with their customers. So they can look at a series of events and saying, is this a journey of disappointment or a journey of delight? And that can be different for all the customers. But we know that if somebody at this point has been on a journey of delight and we do one of these negative things, they'll probably get over it. But if they've been on a journey of disappointment and we do another negative thing, that might be the break. So that's simplified it a little bit, but it's that opportunity to say, the bank has this data, but what they typically have not done is thought about customers in this way.
So you're saying they actually would create a profile of every customer this way? They're dealing with me, they know I'm not happy, so don't send me that impersonal notice. Whereas Mike, they're thrilled with him because he's got tons of money and always happy.
Yeah, but I also wonder, how many journeys are we talking about here, right? Because there's like,
how does that scale?
Gina and myself, we're on different journeys, obviously.
Yeah.
How does it scale?
So, well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, we can make an assumption that everybody who responds to a marketing campaign has broadly similar kinds of emotions. They must have been pleased by the campaign, they responded to it. So let's assume people start at the same point. Of course, we can segment it and need to further do that.
Yeah.
Then we have all this transactional, this event stream data coming in, some of which we know is important, most of which isn't. Most of us don't think about our direct debits unless they don't happen for one reason or another. So we can say they're irrelevant for most people, except in a negative context. So to Gina's point, you absolutely can develop an emotional signature for every single customer, whether you've talked to them recently or not. And it's based upon a running approach to the experiences that they've had. And that's not a big complicated thing. I mean, one of the things that doesn't work and has bedeviled this sector for a while is trying to do regression on emotions and come up with some predictive model. It doesn't work because we're too unique and the emotions are too mercurial. They come and go so quickly.
You have to do it starting today. Like starting with this customer at the moment and then just record it? Like a teller deals with you and this person seems happy with how it worked and they just kind of note 1 to 5, like a Likert scale. Yeah, this person was happy. And then over time, there's more and more data.
So what we do is we research whether the experiences that we are developing through either tellers or through our digital experiences or our infrastructure are A, meeting the logical functional needs of the customers, and B, they give us some feedback. But what we can't do is constantly ask, how was it for you? How was it for you? How was it for you? It's irritating, it's exhausting, and frankly, we just get too much pushback. But if we know that, and for most banks, it's not a long list. It's actually a relatively short list of things that have emotional weight. If we know that those things have happened, if we know that we sent you a penalty notice, we can make an assumption that it had a negative effect. It's now just a question of the degree and how much that's changed how you were feeling before you received that notice. And that's actually simple math. That is not hugely complicated regression analysis.
You just have to identify the points.
The points that are, Now, the good thing is most of the banks are already doing it, but they're not asking the right question. So they're already asking satisfaction survey questions. They're asking for ratings and rankings and give us feedback. But the most valuable asset when thinking about people's emotional state is the language that they use. And rather than say, ask somebody, how do you feel? And you'll get a confused answer back, ask them to describe something. Because human beings are natural storytellers in a social context. And when we describe things, even in a short story, we naturally inject emotional language, which we can detect. So we would say, I found that really enjoyable, or I was a little bored, or a great one I heard was, I love your staff, but I hate the queuing. Now that's actually quite difficult to pick apart because there are two things there. There's the staff and the queuing and the I love it and I hate it, which is why sentiment analysis can struggle with compound statements like that because it's balancing up both things. But the raw emotions are actually quite easy to detect and to score. And we don't need millions and millions of these. We just need a few. And if we deal with a group, it also smooths out some of the problems that we have with natural language processing, such as language, slang, idiom, sarcasm, all of these kinds of things. In an individual conversation, that can make it very hard to be 100% accurate. But if you're gathering 100 of those responses, it smooths out some of those effects. And after
just the
all,
culture of the country also matter, right? Because there are obviously some countries that tend to be more conservative in showing emotions or revealing emotions as well.
Oh, it's a great point, Michael. So this is what I found was really interesting. The way that we feel and what causes that is almost universal. So you stick your hand in a fire, it's going to hurt. It doesn't really matter where on the planet you are. Okay. But the way that we express our emotions can be culturally influenced. Some cultures are more reticent than others about being expressive or expressing negative emotions.
Or some are so polite. You know, with Japanese business partners, I've often found it difficult to, get to an answer because, do you want to do this? Yes. Well, why don't you sign? Yeah.
But you've got to account for a certain baseline of emotional, how emotional these different nationalities are.
So it's not a question of whether they feel the emotion in different cultures, it's whether they express it and how they act upon it. So the good point about that is you can actually do your research at a basic level in the common languages. So, and you can get some inference out of that, which we say, well, we think this holds pretty true for everybody. And then you get nuance, which is cultural. People will typically not say that. But again, if you stick your hand in a fire, it doesn't matter whether you swear in Japanese or English. We can infer from it that it hurt. So you aren't so dependent upon specific languages. And after all, what we're doing within the banking context is we're monitoring the transaction stream. So we're looking at the event, and it's the event that we've modeled and its impact. And so it's keeping track of those events, which is the real challenge. But it does mean you can extrapolate this quite easily, not only across different populations within a country, but across different countries and different cultures. Yes, there'll be some wrinkles, and definitely the way you respond will be different. You wouldn't use very flamboyant California-style language in perhaps an Asian context where it would not, it's not perceived or received very well. But it doesn't mean to say that the sentiment has to change within that. So operationalizing this is a question of scale, not necessarily complexity. Right. But as I think, Gina, you said, it needs a different mindset within the business. Right. That ability to think left and right brain and actually understand that human behavior, unless you want to go for a simple transactional decision, which is to be the cheapest or the most convenient, if you want more out of your relationship with customers, you have to get better at understanding them.
Operationalizing this obviously means that you also have to prepare your touch points, your staff, for them to be more emotive in their relationships with customers moving forward.
And to recognize important moments, right? I was thinking you were talking about flamboyant Californians. I guess I'm one of those. I'm guilty. But I was in America, I had a big national bank and I had a little tiny Midwestern bank, and I had my wallet stolen in Europe. Called the big national bank and said, "Oh, I lost my wallet. What can you do?" They could do very little for me. "Well, do you have ID?" "No." "Well, call us tomorrow." My little tiny bank recognized me by name, no problem. The guy personally sent me $200 in a FedEx package. So I would have never, to this day, I don't need that little bank. I don't. I live in Hong Kong. I have a bank out here, but I cannot bear the thought of getting rid of that little bank, So that was a loyalty moment. And if you could train your people to spot that, that should have just given me the highest emotional score. They could do anything to me, and I don't think I'd get rid of them.
Yeah. How do we become small banks? That's the question.
Yeah, well,
it's a regional.
The conversation started with corner shops when we were talking about customer relationships and one-to-one marketing. We love the corner shop experience. However, most of us go to big supermarkets to do our big weekly shop. So how do you replicate the corner shop experience at scale and at the price that scales up to compete? Gina, to your point, emotional intelligence within staff in customer-facing roles is an absolute must. And also because they're going to be dealing with the complexity of everything left over from the digital world. Yeah. So as more customers move to self-service and digital, what's by necessity left over is more complicated, more human. So not only do they need to be empathic, they need to have ground rules on what they can and cannot do. Can they all decide to send somebody $200 in an envelope? to get over a hurdle. So there's some operational thinking we need to think about. A real big benefit, though, will be when we do use these digital and automated channels. How do we build something that feels authentic in an intermediated experience where we're dealing with an app or something along those lines? So, and that's where, as I say, you can pick tone of voice. You could choose to include somebody in a campaign, or actually not. Let's take the example. I have an irritated customer. The worst thing I could do right now is try to market to them, because they just don't want to hear from me right now.
Right. No,
so what I should do is suppress them from an upsell campaign and put them into a relationship heal campaign, where I decide that customer's valuable enough that I'm going to make an investment in time and money to reach out to them and say, hey, I know things haven't been great. What can we do to fix it? How can we make this better? All of these drive towards the business results that actually the board are really interested in. Higher revenues, lower costs, more loyalty from customers, and all three of those contribute to customer lifetime value. So that's going to become more critical than ever as we go into an economic downturn, which I think is inevitable after what's happening to GDP.
But banks could learn from travel agencies. I mean, I really miss the old-time travel agency. I want to go on a trip. They talk to me. Oh, Gina, I know just where you want to go, what you would like. And, you lost a lot when we moved toward digital travel, and it never really was recovered, but banks can avoid that, maybe. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Michael.
Yeah, I just also wanted to find out, is it easier now with all these technologies that are available to us to be more emotive in traditional industry like banking?
It is, and certainly within the banking world, when we're talking about empathic banking or emotive banking, we are trying to find ways of replicating that personal touch as we roll back the number of branches that we offer, or where we have something that's a slightly less personal interface. You can do it. The biggest operational challenge is not research. There are tools out there, very good tools for understanding language and video and so on. It's that extrapolation into how do I deal with all the customers. After all, most of our customers aren't talking with us most of the time. So it's trying to figure that out. So you can model it, and we can use some of the techniques we're already comfortable with things like predictive modeling and operations for things like real-time marketing and campaign support to develop a more nuanced emotional response. So it's absolutely doable. What I would caution people is don't go down the rabbit hole of complexity. Don't try to build the perfect emotional model. We can't do it. People are too messy and complicated to do that. But better is good enough. If we're better and more human than our competition, we're going to do better. And that's what the world of customer experience has shown. More engaged customers tend to be more valuable, and that's better for the business in the long term. But it's so good at this point, you can start to build very robust ROI cases. So we can start to make informed decisions about whether it's better to spend $100 here or $100 there. So you can talk to the CFO and take the religion of emotion and customer experience and actually build a business case which good CFOs and good CMOs have known about for a long time. What kind of campaigns are going to yield me what kinds of results? And is it better to go with A and B or some mixture of the two?
And I guess then just to be prepared to be agile and rev on that and iterate on that and just keep improving it. Like the old Japanese Kaizen thing, right? Just constant continual improvement every day, a little bit.
Yeah, and people are fickle. We change our minds. So one of the things you have to be aware of is I would never answer the phone and say, hi, Gina, thanks for calling me. I think you're angry right now. What can I do about that? Okay, that's really dangerous. But what we could do is say, well, I can anticipate that if Gina's calling right now, she may well be angry. So perhaps it's better to start off with a slightly more somber greeting than happy clapping. But it can feel, to the degree, we know our banks are not our bestest buddies. We don't think of them in the same way that we think of people, but we can feel there's more value. And when that's been done in things like chat, so when we introduce slightly more emotive language in chat or in digital experience, or it's on tone of voice or scripting, or even routing calls to more emotionally intelligent agents, we know that has a better business result for both sides of the equation. The customer is happier and the bank is happier because that customer actually then goes on to spend more money or not cancel an account So we can recover a situation that might have been negative, and if we get it really right, we can turn it into a positive.
Yeah, people talk so much about digital disruption and how fearsome, but really all digital disruption is successful because of successful user experiences. I mean, you switch to Amazon from your local bookstore because the book gets there faster, and you're happy about how easy and securely that happens. And, it goes on down the line. I mean, I think experience management is the crux of it all.
But yeah, a lot of that came from effort, and particularly in industries that were having very low satisfaction scores to start with. So where things are saying, actually, that isn't a great experience to start with, it's an opportunity for a disruptor to enter. But the thing about effort is, it wasn't so long ago, people would queue around the block for 3 nights to buy the latest Apple iPhone. Clearly, effort isn't a big part of their decision. And in fact, for some of them, it's part of the experience. So we don't want to get hung up on thinking that just because it's easy, it's by necessity good. And it doesn't really matter anyway, because everybody is driving effort out of their customer journeys. At a point, it gets down to everybody, you can do anything you want in 3 clicks. So how do you compete again in that world? In fact, you've done such a good job of breaking the link with the customer by making it so simple that now you don't have the opportunity to develop your relationship. So I'm not saying make the effort high again just to introduce friction, which is not the same as traction, but it's something to think about is, how do we maintain that relationship with our customer, the traction part of our relationship rather than the friction part.
It's terrific stuff, and it's so apt, isn't it, Michael, for DevOps? I mean, DevOps is all about user experience. And
it is all about user experience and getting better one effort at a time. I think that is the point of all of this.
Peter Dorrington, you're just incredible stuff. I really thank you. It's very timely too, and I think.
And finally, we'd like to find out, Peter, what are you drinking?
I forgot to ask him. What are you drinking? I have
it. Hang on, let me try and move that. It's orange juice and mango squash. And for those of you that aren't familiar with squash, it's a horrible British concoction, which is essentially we take everything good out of fruit juice, concentrate it, add sugar, and then we re-dilute it 10-to-1 with water. So it's a very watery fruit juice.
What do happy people drink? We'd like to find out.
What do happy people drink? Oh, well, there's some...
Well, you should say squash, Peter.
I wouldn't say drink too much coffee, because coffee can heighten your sense of emotions, both positive and negative. For calmness, people tend to drink tea. A lot of people will say that tea makes them feel more calm. Not quite the same thing as happiness, but I'll take equanimity and calmness over the kind of excitement we're all living through right now, any day of the week.
Serenity can be happiness. And on that note, Peter Dorrington, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you'll definitely come back and talk more to us about this as things unfold.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of DevOps Drinks. I'm Gina Smith.
I'm Michael Araneta.
And we will see you next week.